All right, guys. Today I want to talk about threat modeling, and we got Sean on the line here. Hey, give us an introduction to what threat modeling is and why it would be helpful for people and how it works.
Yeah, sure. So, threat modeling is a process borrowed from cybersecurity, and threat modeling is about figuring out what the actual threats to you or your business or whatever are, and then spending your effort on controls to prevent those specific threats rather than threats that don't exist or don't apply to you or are unlikely. And so, a lot of guys you'll hear about, they're basically preppers, they've got underground bunkers, they've got other nonsense, but an apocalyptic zombie wasteland that's not the most potent threat to them. Really, the much more potent threats are getting divorced, through the back door, if you know what I'm talking about. Getting sued by some company or some other person, right? Getting accused of attacking somebody. Those are the real threats to you. And so your threat model, when you model those threats, it allows you to not waste effort on things like bunkers and 25-gallon water drums, and to spend more time avoiding situations that are going to get you robbed, attacked, just things that are going to ruin your life for 2 or 3 years. So that's what threat modeling is. It's finding out what things actually matter. For guys, divorce, that would be a big part of that model, and you would avoid that risk by not getting married. Most people would do that. That's the best way to deal with a threat, is to avoid it. Obviously, if you can't, you put in other controls to mitigate it. But that's the basic premise of threat modeling.
Right. So what situations would be, where you would put yourself most statistically at risk in this life? Like, if I think about it, I'm just going to guess. I'm going to say working a corporate job. You would be at risk of losing, getting either sued or losing your job because of some kind of a quota where you're doing a great job. I've seen this so many times now in the last couple of decades where a guy's doing a great job and then they just decide there's too many people that look like him in C-suite positions in that company. And then that guy will lose his job. And also, too, I know there was an excellent, a very, very good, very, very in-depth article. I don't know if you read it. It was in the Hollywood Reporter, which is a very, very left-wing magazine. But this was a great piece, and it really broke down how the writers of old, like all the people that wrote all the all the great movies and TV shows, they're not getting the chance to write scripts anymore. And these are the guys who were kind of the champions of woke, basically. They were the ones who were the champions of many things that are now taking their jobs away. And you can laugh about these guys, and I know a lot of people do. They'll say, they asked for it and stuff. But if you read this piece, it's pretty terrifying, actually. And it's good to know that threat exists, because I think people prepare for things they think are going to happen. But I think most people don't have the emotional fortitude to really face a lot of the darkness in the world, if you know what I'm saying. So they'll make like one thing that they're really worried about, but they can't really face the fact that their brother is doing this to them, right? Or that their wife is doing that to them. You know what I mean? Like they can't face the fact that their job backed them in a corner where now they are kind of a shell of themselves because they're not allowed to talk. They're not allowed to be themselves. They're not allowed to, they're essentially totally silenced, right? So the risk isn't necessarily catastrophic. It's also a risk that you're going to be neutered and you're not going to live your real life, Mm-hmm. Would you put all those, how would you, classify those?
Well, you would just take for each thing, for each threat, there would be an associated risk. So getting married on its own is just or getting divorced, is just a threat. Obviously, there's things in there that are going to be happening. Those things are going to be the risks. So when you get divorced, there's a big risk of losing your money. And each risk, you would weigh it by its severity and its likelihood. So when you get divorced, it's very likely that you're going to lose a lot of money. So the risk is very severe and it's very likely. So that, you take, like, let's say you got a 50% chance of losing $1 million. Well, 50% of $1 million is $500,000. So that risk is a $500,000 risk, right? You can quantify a lot of these risks. Some of them you can't, but a lot of them you can. And then you use those compared to other risks, and you can find out which ones are more important, and you prioritize them. So now here's your number one risk. Here's number two, number three, number four. And most of your effort should be going to your high risks, right? The U.S. collapsing and turning into an anarchist wasteland with roving bands of people, Mad Max style, is unlikely, and it wouldn't hurt you that much anyway, right? Like that's not the same as like having your kids stolen away. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Be like not having anything and having to be walking around in a PUBG environment is not that big of a deal, right? You didn't lose a lot of stuff. You're still alive. You're not a slave. It's much worse for something like getting divorced, where you still have society. You lost all your money. Things are still expensive. And that's much more likely, right? It's much more. It's a much higher priority to protect against.
Well, let me say this. I think that it's even worse than what you're saying. But okay, so this is just my own experience as a man, right? Watching other men in my life and looking at other men's lives. I think that men usually, most men only have, and these are like the better men, like the men that do better in life. They only have one period of life where they really do well. Like when you see a guy who's rich and you probably think the guy did well for, he always went to the best school. He always did this. He always, he always got the great job. And then this. I haven't found that to be true. I found it's like strike when the iron's hot. The guy might have been an average student and had a bunch of failures. And then he got involved in something that was very profitable. And for whatever reason, it was a very good time for that industry. And so then he made a ton of money, okay, in that one period. And then he bought a house, he got his retirement set up, he got everything going, all his cars, and it was like he was in the stream of life, in the peak of his earnings and his motivation, and the wind was at his back, And then women tend to leave a man when he's down, when they'll pick a man who's in the stream of life, and then they'll leave him as soon as he goes down. But when the guy goes down, you can imagine, like, you've had a tough life, right? You haven't been successful, and then you suddenly hit one thing where you're very successful. Like I would say, you could look at yourself through this prism. Right now you're doing very well, right? Like life is going, it's smooth and everything seems easy. And you're like, why doesn't everybody just do this? And it's like, you're actually like the wind is at your back right now. And the danger is most guys don't realize it. And so they underestimate the value. So they think, well, I'll get married. And if I get divorced, I'll just do it again. But what happens is times change. So whatever technology you're good at gets out of date. The company that you work for loses money. And so I guess what I'm saying, a long way of saying, is that you might lose $500,000, but that $500,000 over the next 4 decades is going to be worth, let's say, probably $8 million if you invest it.
Yeah.
Right? If you just invested a regular return, like 7%, right? And the thing is when you lose that $500,000, not only do you lose the possibility of the money multiplying over time, but you also get hit by the woman leaving at the same time. And you also get hit by a lawsuit, which makes it less likely that you're going to be able to have time to work. And also, it's going to hurt your emotional health so that you won't quite have that smile that you had before. You know, that kind of zest for life, that easygoingness that you have right now, right? And then on top of that, you know, the lawsuit takes a lot out of you. And on top of that, society looks down on you for being divorced. You know, they don't trust you. You lose, usually most married divorced guys lose their friends at that time too. So the divorce is much more devastating than I think men want to realize or accept, because if they really realize how fragile they are as men, it doesn't give them confidence. You know what I mean? It doesn't make them feel good. No one wants to think that they're fragile, right? But I see life as very fragile just because I've watched so many men. And so that $500,000 is easily in the value of $8 million plus, you know, how much is your emotional health worth, right? How much is your happiness, and how many years does that take off your life at the end, right? You know, it's a very devastating thing. So yeah, you might be done with it in 3 years, as far as on the surface, but most men are never the same. And I'll just say this last. There was a guy in my neighborhood. His wife, she was hot. She was Swiss. She had a big rack. She was the kind of girl that every guy likes. She had the bouncy rack. She had the French accent. She was skinny. She had a bit of a bum. You know what I mean? She had little patties. She had nice ass. For a white girl, she had a big ass. And she was just very, very playful. She was always smiling. She was a good cook. And he married her. She was an au pair, taking care of kids here. He married her. He was, you know, obviously so in love with her. This is a guy I know very well. And she pushed him to buy everything they bought. And he ended up having to declare bankruptcy. And twice, she pushed him to bankruptcy twice, where he bought, you could blame it on him, you could blame it on her. But he kept buying stuff to make her happy. And then eventually she left him for a doctor. You know, and her sister told him later, she always does that. She always like leaves guys. She uses them up and then she leaves them, right? And that guy, you could say he's weak or whatever, but he moved back in with his parents' house and he still lives there. And his life was shattered. It was totally shattered. He was never the same. Never. Now he has no friends. He was very social before. He's a good-looking guy. He's tall. He's got everything that you would think is a Chad, right? But in the end, he's a recluse now. He really is. He's a recluse. And he's 57, so he ain't going nowhere, right? So I think that your model of $500,000, it's almost in the category of a whole life. You know, like so many guys are totally destroyed. And you can blame it on the guys, or you can say, look, I don't know how I would respond in that case, but I know I want to protect myself, right? So how do you do that? What would you, if you determined that divorce was potentially an $8 million risk, plus your health and your friends and kind of your freedom, what do you do with that?
Well, you would, that would probably be your biggest risk by far. People, how much do guys think about things like getting robbed, right? They buy all these guns, they learn how to fight just so they don't get robbed. It's unlikely you'll be robbed anyway if you're aware of your surroundings. And even if you are, you're only going to lose like a couple $100 or get your ass beat. And those aren't a big deal. You know what I mean? I've gotten my ass beat plenty of times. Like it didn't really affect me for more than like a day Whereas getting divorced, that's huge. And so you should treat getting divorced, 1,000 times worse than getting robbed, 1,000 or 10,000. And so all the effort you're putting into that, buying guns, learning how to loot, all this other stuff, you should be spending about 1,000 times more effort making sure you don't get divorced. And the biggest way, so once you identify a risk, then you have ways to mitigate the risk. And this from risk management, obviously you can avoid the risk. That's the best way to do it. That costs no money. That costs no effort. You just avoid it. So just don't get married. It's very, very easy to avoid getting, divorced, is just get married, right? Then you don't have to worry about it. There's transfer, which is like getting insurance. That's not really something you're going to be able to do for most of the threat modeling you're doing in your life. That's like more like if your house gets burned down or something. And then beyond, mitigate. Divorce is something definitely that you have no power to mitigate, really, besides like fleeing the country. There's no mitigation. It's very much out of your hands. There's no winning. Well, once it starts, you're going to lose something. And so the best thing to do would just be to avoid that risk by not getting married. And that's the way you would deal with most risks. If you don't want to get your ass beat in a bar, then you don't go to bars at night, right? If you don't want to get shot, don't go to bars at night, don't go to ghettos at night, and you'll vastly reduce your chances of that happening.
Okay.
Instead of spending a lot of time learning how to shoot properly and having tactical attachments on your guns and thinking about scenarios and practicing. Instead of doing that, you could just not go. And that requires a lot less effort, and you could do something else with your time.
It's interesting because now that I think about it, like almost all the risk a man has as far as like dangers in life, like one of the most common things is false allegations in family courts. Because because they don't, depends on the state. I can't say I'm not a lawyer or an expert, but I know that in the state that I was in, there's no prosecution for, what's it called? Lying, perjury. There's no,
right.
There's no, a woman can lie in court, in a family court, and say that he was this or he was that. And then the judges don't, if it finds out that it wasn't true, they don't do anything. But each time that you're accused of something, let's say of some kind of violence, there's a high chance that you're going to go to prison. Like literally, like lose your job and go to prison and your child. So how would you calculate, like how would you structure, because when I think about it, basically cohabitating with a woman has been determined to be the same as marriage in many, many states, right?
In terms of the risks,
No,
it's pretty close.
Yeah. It's like
because you still get child support problems, you still get domestic abuse issues. The only difference is that they can't get as much money out of you. A lot of the other risks are the same, and a lot of the risks you care about are non-monetary. They're things like having your life flipped upside down permanently, going to prison, wasting time in court, having ruin, losing all your friends. It's intangibles. And so for those intangibles, cohabitating is pretty much exactly the same.
Yeah, because the thing is, when you're accused of something, just simply being accused of something causes, because of human nature, I guess, everybody to run away from you. Like, you think, oh, my friends will stick with me. No, they won't. Nobody will stick with you. The only people who might stick with you, you might have a best friend or whatever, but like nobody else will stick with you. And anybody who's been through it knows this. People just, they don't want to support you in the slight chance that it's true. Basically, they're doing their own risk analysis. Yeah. And they're saying, hey, well, what if it is true? I don't want to be the guy supporting this guy. So they say, well, until I know, which to them, knowing means the judge deciding, right? So they don't even care. Most people don't even care if it's true or not. All they care is if you get convicted, basically. And then also they care about you being accused. Because once you've been accused of something, with the good kind of words we don't want to use here, that YouTube censors, but once you're accused, your life is never the same. Because it's not just the intangibles of your friends, time that you can't work, emotional distress. It's loss of motivation and joy. It's a very, very dangerous thing to be fighting a dangerous ghost like a false accusation. It's incredibly difficult. And I think a lot of people just can't deal with it. It's just too difficult. You're being lied about and you're being made into a monster and it has nothing to do with you. It's like, it's impossible. It's so difficult to deal with for guys. So would you say, how would you put it into like, there's one major, like simple thing to do, which is don't cohabitate, right?
That's exactly correct. You just avoid the risk. You avoid all risks in life. There's a million risks you avoid. The only risks that you take on are to get a reward from them. Just like investment. Like you don't take on a risk without a commensurate benefit or reward. Number one, you wouldn't do anything without a benefit anyway, but you certainly wouldn't take a risk. And cohabitating, what is the benefit? There's none, right? Like it doesn't benefit you. Maybe it's a little more convenient. Maybe if you don't make a lot of money, maybe you'll save some money on rent, hypothetically. There's no benefits, so just don't do it. The same thing with marriage for a lot of guys. If you're not, I don't know how other guys feel, but if you don't want kids, then there is really no benefit. So you just avoid it, right? And other people like places like America, countries, they need to run. Okay, they need fuel, and they're all broke, so they have to get a new fuel source every now and again. So once they get finished selling their own land, they got to find something else. And once they get finished, wiping out pensions, so they got to go find something else. And so the thing that they found recently is guys. They said, there's a whole lot of married guys. What if we could just take a bunch of money from them? So we'll convince the wife to divorce the husband, and when they do so, then a lot of money will come out of that, right? A lot of their stored up savings will go to lawyers and taxes and arbitration and all this other stuff. That money will come back into the economy and get things moving again. So that's the new pig that's going to the slaughter. That's the new target. And so when you're in a country that's starving, that's desperate, it's like a starving animal, you have to be aware of that and be looking out for, okay, what's the next pig they're going to go for? Is it going to be full? Is it going to be happily married people with tons of money? Is it going to be bachelors with a lot of money in a U.S. bank account? Like, well, who knows what it's going to be? But they need money. They're a ravenous animal. And so you have to be, if you're aware of that, then you'll avoid putting yourself into vulnerable positions where they might be able to start chewing on you.
Right. Interesting analogy. Yeah. What else do you see? That's interesting perspective. I've never heard that, but keep going.
Beyond that, once you can avoid problems with girls, after that, there's really not that many other issues. You might get, like, starting a business in America is obviously a pretty big risk.
Well, one thing I've seen is, since I've been back, is that I realized that as long as you don't have a car, right, you don't invite the police into your life. Like, the police, they never bother with you. The way they get into your life is through a car. When you're
that's true.
As soon as you're in a car, you park a car, you're driving a car, you own a car, because of the registration and all these different things. And that's how they're able to stop you. Like if you're just walking down the street, they really can't do anything. You know what I mean? But as soon as you have a car, they can say, well, he was speeding, he made a wrong turn or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a million excuses to pull you over.
Right. Well, in the past, if someone attacked you, then you had no recourse unless you could recognize the face. Even if you took a picture, you really had no recourse. But now, people, when you drive a car, it has a number on the back. It's almost like a barcode. And so it's like having a tag attached to your head. It's like having a barcode that people can automatically scan. That license plate, that's connected to a name. And so when somebody robs you on foot, it's hard to find out who they are. But if they do a crime and they're in their vehicle, then you have then you have an ID on them.
Right. Right. So you put yourself, you're being tracked, right?
Oh yeah.
By your automobile.
Right. But in terms of being tracked, you're being tracked by your cell phone all the time, but
they don't pull out, everybody talks about that one all the time, but I haven't found it.
Pull them out. Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't found it to be a big deal. Like I haven't found anybody following me. I've never found anybody, you know what I mean? Like, of course.
They don't have to. When you committed a crime or they fought, then they could go back in time and then they would go through all the stuff. That's the beauty of it, is they don't have to actively do anything. They just store it.
Right, but it still doesn't. If you get rid of your phone, it doesn't tell them where you are.
No, it's not the same as a license plate.
No,
police. It's too much effort.
I think
if I wanted to find out who broke into my car, I couldn't ask the police to go get all the records of where the location of everybody in my city.
That's what I mean. Like,
get it. They're not going to do that. If I was like the president, they would.
Right.
But they're not going to do it for me.
That's what I'm saying. Like the real risk is as soon as you have a license plate that's associated with your name, then all of a sudden it's so easy, right? It's they got you, right? They got you. So I prefer countries where you don't need a car. And also, people die in car crashes too, speaking of risk. My friends that, drove to work their whole lives, like I come back home, right? And I talk to my friends and I say, how you doing? This and that. A lot of them have neck problems from being hit in the back of in their car. Because in Southern California, you do a lot of driving, right? And
right.
They've been driving in crowded streets, up to LA and this and that for the last 40 years. And in those 40 years, they're going to get hit. At least
1% of all people in the U.S. die from vehicle accidents.
Every year, or?
No, 1%, like over your lifetime.
Oh, I see.
So when you die, there's a 1% chance that it was caused by a vehicle. So motorcycle, airplane, boat, car, mostly cars. But
right.
It's 1% of everybody.
But I think the risk is not really so much dying these days. It's more like just injury,
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure. Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, obviously, for every death, there's a lot more. Oh, now my knee doesn't work right. Now my back kind of tweaks.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, they're like crippled, right? And
right.
And they don't know. Like I don't have any injuries like that because I stopped driving when I went overseas. I bought cars and motorcycles, but I didn't have to do the grind that they have to do. It's just the daily grind that gets them.
Right. Well, that's the same thing for like working out. The main cause of injury from working out is not some one-off thing where you drop the bar on your chest when you're bench pressing. Most workout injuries come from repetitive strain. So you're doing push-ups the wrong way, and over 1 or 2 years, you develop some kind of sensitivity in one of your arms, and now it makes this weird clicking sound. You move it a certain way. That's most injuries. Yeah,
if you can, people think this is actually a good topic because when I talk about doing dangerous things, like swimming in that cave and on the front of the boat and this and that, and they think that's so incredible. But the thing is I think there's more risk just driving to work here in Southern California every day.
Well, there is. Yeah.
Yeah. And not exciting, but it's more risk.
Oh, yeah. Well, because you're doing it a lot more times. That's the thing, is that risk is multiplied by the times that you're doing it. And so, well, roughly multiplied. Obviously, statistics aren't quite like that. But, if you do something 100 times, then it's going to be about 66 times more likely that it's going to happen to you. You know what I mean?
Is that right? 100 times means 66 more.
Yeah, it doesn't mean 100 times because, obviously there's you can do the statistics on it, but yeah, if there's a 1% chance of something happening and you do it twice, then the odds of it then the odds of it happening are 1 minus 99 times 99. So it's going to be almost 2%. Right.
And they just keep going out. Yeah, I think a lot of risk is that kind of stuff. Where guys are sleepwalking through life.
Yeah.
And the risks are adding up, right?
Oh yeah.
Let's see. I think the risks I see today.
Also, people's brains are adapted to the risks of the past. You know what I mean? Getting clubbed to death, being alone, poisonous animals, things getting dark outside. Like they're attuned to those kind of risks. But those kind of risks aren't nearly as big of a deal as they were. Right? The modern risks are being around somebody who's crazy. That's a huge risk, right? Having people who the wrong people know too much information about you. That's a big risk, right? Cohabitating, that's a huge risk, right? Those are the kind of risks that you would want to avoid. Saying something sideways to the woman downstairs who likes to sue people. That's a huge risk. That's like putting your head in the mouth of a tiger. Like that's that comical risk that you're taking. It's that egregious and insane to do. That's what it's like. Yeah.
But people don't think that way. They think, well, she's just my neighbor. What can she really do to me? I'm a man. What is she going to do? But the truth is, like you say, I knew a woman who, I was with a chick who made her living off suing people.
Oh, yeah.
That's how she made her money. I didn't realize that when I first met her. But as she started telling me, she was like, hey, if you ever need any money, I got plenty of money. I was like, why do you have plenty of money? You're a nurse. And then what happened was she had sued everybody. She sued her neighbor because she said the dog bit her. Then she sued her landlord because she slipped on the ground on the driveway. Then she sued the emergency room where she was working as a nurse when she fell down. And when she was injured, she went back to that emergency room and they wouldn't help her. None of the other nurses would. Nobody would fucking help her. Yeah.
That's funny.
She was so pissed off. But that was what she did. She sued people for a living.
Yeah. There's real life monsters. People don't understand. They're worried about tigers and getting robbed and all this. Like a robber, I'd much rather meet a robber than some of these monsters that are lurking around. And nobody's protecting you from them. It's like it's tigers and bears just walking right next. There's no protection. There's no glass in the way. They're just
right. We lost Sean for a second here, but I totally Yeah, 100% get what you're saying. Yeah, like it's like they look like regular people, but they're actually very dangerous.
Yeah, and they're invisible, right? To a lot of people. I mean, obviously, that's another thing. Like, people are not aware. They're just like walking around. They're like, yeah, if somebody tried to rob me, and they start describing their plan for how to protect themselves. Meanwhile, they're like living with some girl, and on top of and aware of their surroundings. They're like bragging about how much money they make. They're like talking about where their investments are to their cousin who's like broke all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
They're completely desensitized and just unaware of what the actual risks are, and so their risk model looks ridiculous. It looks comical. They're protecting against getting robbed. They're protecting against just really things that aren't a big deal and probably aren't going to happen anyway. And then meanwhile, they're exposing themselves to enormous risks for absolutely no reason.
Well, that's why, that's one thing I really don't like about a lot of the podcasts in this area, because there's a lot of guys, I don't want to say names of podcasts, but they're saying, like, I'm a high value guy, and, women want high value guys, blah, 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 and I have X amount of money, and they tell their audience that, right? And they tell the girls that, and they have no idea that.
Why on earth would you ever tell anyone that? That's the dumbest thing. That's like, please kill me. Please come ruin my life.
Well, not only that, but they misunderstand. They have these terms like high value man. The high value, there's no such thing as a high value man. Okay, there never was. It's just a temporary label. Basically, women don't think you're high value. Women laugh at these labels because they don't think a guy is high value. They think the guy has a bunch of money right now. That's what they think. Is, he's got a bunch of money right now. And so that's why you see a lot of women being interviewed that say they like drug dealers in the hood, right? It's not that they like bad boys. It's that guy has a ton of money and he's going to throw the money around while the times are good. But then later, when he gets shot or busted or whatever, then he won't have anything, right? Or he won't be here any longer. So the girls, they'll let you label yourself a high value man as kind of a way to identify plump pigs for the slaughter, right?
Yeah. High value. They call them high value targets.
Right. The thing to do is to keep it low down. You really want to be anybody who hasn't seen my black box episode. Go back and watch the black box episode, because a lot of young guys don't know this. When I say young guys, I say up to 30. They just don't know this yet. They think, women are attracted to money, and so I'm going to make a bunch of money, and I'm going to make it obvious I have money, and then I'll get a bunch of women, and they have no idea. They have no idea. They're putting themselves into the slaughter, slaughterhouse.
Oh yeah, just insane.
Yeah, the women are like, well, I didn't know that you were available to go to the slaughterhouse, but I guess you are. He's like, oh yeah, I am a high value, sheep ready to go. And then she's like, well, that's fantastic.
Whoa, high value? No way.
That's right. Crazy. Yeah, you are high value. And all she thinks is like, how much money do you have? And how much fame do you have? How much? And then as soon as that goes away, it's like these guys, not only are they setting themselves up for failure, like for women to use them and attracting the wrong women, because there are different kinds of women. I mean, there's women that are definitely out for money right now. And there's women that are out for the long game. And the long game women are much better. Generally, the long game women are the ones that want to basically have you work for them, and they want to have your children and raise your children, and you work for them till the day you die. And most guys would accept that bargain. That's like the long game, because they're still living off you, right? But it's kind of acceptable to a lot of guys, right?
That's right. a lot of guys think that's a lot of guys wish it would go back to those days. They're like, oh man, I miss the old deal. It was so good. You just worked forever. And that's it.
And then she pretends like, you're a high value guy.
Yeah, she's like, oh, you're awesome. You're so cool. You go champ. You're the star employee.
Oh, yeah.
You're employee of the month. You're employee of the month every month.
Yep.
It's awesome.
Yep. And as long as she keeps giving him that validation, the guy's like, hey, I'm a winner. Because he's using her opinion of him to make his own self-esteem, right? To judge his own self-esteem. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons why you don't want to put yourself in that position. What are risks? If you think of all the risks, I would say one of the risks is just simply living in America.
Well, that would be a threat.
A threat.
The threat would be living in America. The risk would be what would happen to you as a result.
Okay, the threat.
Divorce would be a threat, but then having your wallet pulled out of one of the holes in your body, that would be a risk. You know what I mean? Okay,
so a threat. Because the first thing I noticed when I came back to America is that I felt, that people aren't going to believe this because they're going to say, well, like this doesn't happen to white guys. But I definitely felt like cops were hassling me, Like they would ask me questions like, well, I went surfing with my buddy at Trails, right? We came out of the water. This guy had this huge flashlight in our faces. And I was like, fuck, dude, get the fucking thing out of my face. And then I look and it was a cop. And I was like, oh, shit. And then he goes, what are you guys doing here? And we're all wet, carrying surfboards, walking out of the ocean. And we just got out of the ocean, climbed the cliff, right? And then and I looked at him like he's a total idiot. I'm like, what do you think, right? And then he like, he just kind of like kept asking me questions. And finally I just said, dude, what are you looking for? Like, really? Like, not for nothing, but like, what are you, like, we're obviously surfing, right? And he goes, well, there's been a lot of homosexual activity in the bathrooms here. And I was like, no way, and then another time a cop, he came up next to me at the harbor with the light in my face. And he said, where are you going? And I said, I'm walking. And then he said, where are you walking to? I said, I'm walking around. He goes, well, where are you walking around to? And I said, I don't know. And he didn't like those answers. But that was the truth. Those were truthful answers. And then finally I thought, well, I better explain it to him. So I said, I'm listening to an audiobook. And he said, well, how long are you going to walk? And I said, well, I don't know. Depends on how long the battery lasts on my MP3. And then he said, well, he was like really frustrated by now. Like he was in my face wanting me to punch him at this point. And oh yeah, right in my face. And I was like, I can't believe this because I didn't do anything wrong. And like everybody tells me that unless you're, it depends on the color of your skin, you're going to get hassled by cops. I think everybody gets hassled by cops here.
No, I get hassled too. Oh yeah, it comes to the worst. You anytime you're within earshot of them, they'll whatever they're doing, they'll ask you. They'll be like, hey, do you know this car? Or hey, do you know whose car this is? Or they'll just ask you some kind of nonsense to like try to pull you. They call it fishing. Cops will fish. So like when they see you, any reason they can come up with, they'll start asking you questions to try to get you to say something that reveals something that allows them to go further. So they're constantly fishing people.
Oh.
Yeah, it's super annoying.
Wow. I tell you, that does not happen overseas.
Wow.
It doesn't. There are things to be careful about. You can get set up by the cops with pot. There's things that they can do. Definitely there's speeding traps. There's, I'm not saying there's no risks overseas, but the risks overseas, to me, they're less evil. They're just very straightforward. You know what I mean? Like they can always be handled with a few bucks, Yeah. They're not trying to ruin their life. You're not going to get a record for them. They're just basically, they want a few bucks. Like some drunk guy pulled me over in India and he was wasted and he just wanted a couple bucks, And that happened to me in Pattaya once. It's happened many times overseas. But I always feel like it's no big deal. I don't, you know what I mean? Because I can kind of look at the guy and I feel like, he doesn't have much money. He's trying to make a buck. And I can give him the money right then. I don't have to, you know what I mean? I have no record. I don't have paperwork. I don't have to, I wasn't doing anything wrong, but it's not a big amount of money. So he's not going to stop me and say, give me $2 billion. You know what I mean? It's like, It's usually going to be something you'd have in your wallet. $20, right? That's like a common amount. $20, right? Then to me, that's nothing, right? But here, it's much more serious because they're trying to rile you up. And then if you move your hand within 18 inches of them, that's considered assault of a police officer.
Even if you don't touch them?
No, within 18 inches.
Wow.
So if you just move your hand, like, get away from me, and then you move your hand towards him, if it goes within 18 inches, that's assault of a police officer.
Wow. Yeesh.
And me and my friend in Hong Kong, we always talk about it. It's like walking on eggshells. We think, okay, guys who live overseas, you guys who live here, you don't really realize. We think that every man is like 2 paychecks away from being homeless, and he's walking on eggshells not to get arrested. That's what we think. Living overseas.
That's what a lot of people's lives are like in America. Yeah.
Whereas, like, when you're here, you're like a frog in water. You think that's normal. Boiling, heating up water, right?
Right.
But overseas, you have different risks. I don't want to give people the idea that there are no risks overseas, but I much prefer those risks overseas myself because it's more based on your own decisions. So, for example, if you decide you want to do something illegal in Singapore, then the penalty is going to be higher than here. But you don't have to do something illegal. There's no reason to do it, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just don't do it. You have more control. Whereas here, I feel like you're just being set up. Like, you're always like, you're so close. You know what I mean? Like, you could just... I just see it as America, like, you're walking on eggshells. That's what I think.
Yeah, that's definitely how it feels. Every time you see cops, you definitely want to get as far away from them as possible. Like, the only place you're safe is in your house. If you're in your house and the cops knock, you can just ignore them. You just pretend like they're not there.
Really?
Well, yeah. Cops can't. That's a big thing in America. Is cops can't just roll into your house. They need a warrant or they need whatever. Cops will knock on your door, for 15, 30 minutes, but you just don't answer. And you don't need a reason. You're just like, I don't feel like answering. The last thing you want to do is let cops into your house, because then they'll start. That's when a bad cop will plant drugs, or they'll just start digging around. Even if you haven't done anything wrong, they just want to mess with you.
Yeah, because overseas you can open a door to a cop, no problem.
Wow.
Yeah, no problem. You just say hi, and then he'll say what he's doing, and then, unless you're doing something wrong, you know what I mean? If you're just a normal guy, like, they'll come by and do, like, what is it called? Like, questionnaires, find out what country you're from and how long you've been there and, what kind of job you're doing. They might ask you a few things, and then they put in their records, and that's it. It's no big deal. You don't want to have... You don't need to be an expert on police to live your life in other countries. Like
over here, you do. Over here, people are always like learning the different tricks and what you have to say and when you have to ask for a lawyer and everything. You basically got to kind of be a lawyer in America. Everybody has to have a baseline of legal training.
Yeah, that's what I feel. You really don't need that overseas. You don't need to be a lawyer. You just have to be a reasonable guy. I remember I called the cops in Japan once, and my landlord... Oh, no, I didn't call him. My landlord did. she put this, she was really crazy, right? And I was boning all these chicks in the house, and she got jealous. So she came up there and tried to bone me, right? But she was ugly, right? So I wasn't going to bone her. And she got really hurt. And so she started to like sabotage my mail, and she put a big pile of salt outside my house like you do when someone dies in Japan. And then, yeah. And then one day I woke up and I tried to open my front door, and she had put this huge potted plant in front of my door. And so I went out the side door, and then I got the big potted plant. I went downstairs and said, hey, this is my, it was like in the hallway to my room. Like it was technically part of my apartment. I said, this is my private space. I don't want a plant there, And I put the plant downstairs, and then she brought it back up and put it back there. And so then I said, don't put it there. I can't open my door. I can't get out my front door. And then she put it back there. So then I just took it and I walked down to the garbage, right? So there's like, in Japan, there's like a garbage collection center area, right? So I started walking down there. And then next thing I know, these two cops came running up to me, right? And I was like, oh, what's going on? And the guy's like, freeze, And I was like, oh, shit. So I put the plant down, and then the guy's like, they were both very nervous, these two cops. I don't think they dealt with foreigners much. But luckily, by then I spoke Japanese and everything. And they said, what are you doing with that plant? You put that plant down. You stole that plant. I said, oh, okay. I said, let me explain, boys. So I took him up to my apartment. In Japanese, I just pointed out. I said, look, there's my front door. My landlord put this plant in front of my front door. And I said, you can see the dirt in front of my front door where she put it, because it's spilled out, right? And I said, she put it there, and then I moved it. And I went downstairs and asked her, and she said, and I said, she put it back. And then I said, I can't get out of my front door. It's not reasonable. And it's not her area. It's not public space. I rent that space. And the cops looked at me, and then she comes out and starts yelling at me. And in Japan, usually the cops will side with the Japanese person, right? Generally. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of guys are afraid of talking to cops overseas. I'm not, because I found them to be very, very reasonable. Because they're not like cops here where everything is by the book. The cops overseas, this is my experience. I'm just telling you my experience. They listen to reason. And I know that sounds weird, but they listen to reason. If you're not making sense, they're going to fuck you over, right? But the cops looked at me, and they looked at her, and the guy goes to me, he goes, it was really hilarious, actually. Because by now the neighbors were out and everything, right? It was like afternoon. And he looks at me, he goes, Paul, you're probably a busy guy. You probably got many things to do. Why don't you go do some work or whatever you got to do? You don't have to worry about this here. And then I couldn't believe it, right? Because it was a real face to her, right? And then I started walking away, and then he goes, and the guy looks at her and goes, she started yelling, and they go, if you ever call the cops again with something fake like this, we will never, and they started yelling at her. I was just laughing. I was just laughing so hard because it was totally true, right? It was totally true. But like technically, a cop here might have said, hey, you technically stole her plant, right? Because I moved it off the property, right? There, the cop listened to the story. They listened to her, and they said they made it very, obviously the obvious choice, right? Is that you're not allowed to put a plant to block someone's front fucking door, right? You're obviously trying to piss them off, or you're pulling some shit, right? So I expected when I came back that Americans were the same way. That you could reason with the cops, and you could talk with them, and you could just tell them, hey, another time I called the cops when this Chinese guy in Shanghai, he stole my friend's a bunch of stuff, his clients and everything from his company. And we realized he was defrauding my friend. And I called the cops, and the cops came over, and I said, look, here's this guy's computer. He's ripping off my fucking friend, Charles, and he's already stole hundreds of thousands of dollars. You can see right here. And the cops, they looked at it, and I don't know what they did with the guy, but definitely my friend didn't have any more problems with the guy. He did. I think he lost the money, but the guy didn't do anything else. You know what I mean? Like, he could have done much more damage, right? And my friend had money, so it wasn't like the end of the world for him. It was just like he wanted to get rid of this guy so he could focus on his business, right? And it worked out great. And the cops, even something that complicated, they looked at I showed him the computer the guy had stole the money, and they basically said to the guy in front of me, they said, people like you give Chinese a bad reputation, which was totally true, right? If you act that way, you're going to get, people are going to think badly of you, right? And that's what I'm used to. And I feel so sad to see America this way,
Yeah.
It's like, I don't feel like they're trying to get the bad guys here. And I don't feel like they're protecting the good guys.
I don't know why it's like that.
Yeah, you would think that there's some way to reverse this, but I just can't. I don't get it. I don't understand what benefit there is to the system to be treating, to make people nervous, because I make more money when I'm not nervous, right? I do better when I'm comfortable, right? I'm not on my game, right? But here, the whole system makes you wary,
Yeah, it does. It makes you not want to be here. It makes you not want to go to public spaces because there's cops there that are just going to mess with you. Like leaving your house feels like, to me, it always feels like a risk.
Right. And I think it is. It is.
And cops are much more dangerous to you than like a robber. Because a robber, most of them don't want to kill you. They just want some money. Whereas a cop has some kind of like stupid ego thing. And they're just like this violent moron, right? Like cops in America, if you're over a certain intelligence level, they won't hire you as a cop. Like they target an IQ of between like 85 and 100. And if you're over 100, you can be a detective. But if you're over a certain amount, I think it's like 115 or 120, they give you a psychological eval when you go to apply. And if you score over a certain amount, they won't hire you.
Is that just one state? I can't remember
the reasoning. It was like people over a certain amount, they don't follow instructions to the letter very well, and that's what they want or something. But it's in America, it's like that. So you have this dumb, violent person messing with you.
Who has a quota?
Mess with you. Actually, people get cops get promoted based on how many crimes they can document and how many people they can bust. And detectives and prosecutors get promoted based on how many convictions they can get,
Right. Man, that stuff, I think you guys here don't realize you don't have to live under this tyranny.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like tyranny, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it is tyranny. Definitely. And the thing is, you're so used to it, it's like a frog in hot water. It's only when you're not around it,
And on the converse side, like cops are completely useless for anything that you need them for. If somebody's like my friend Adam, there was a homeless guy that was like chasing him around in the hotel lobby, threatening to kill him. The cops heard over the 911 call. They heard it. They heard all that stuff going on, and when they came over, they just told the homeless guy to leave, and that was it. There was no charges. There was nothing, even though he was like assaulting him. Nothing happened, So it was a complete waste of time. Every time I've dealt with the cops, it's always been enormously inconvenient, a huge waste of time, and nothing comes of it. Calling cops is like pouring gasoline on yourself.
Well, especially
you're just asking for danger, because there's a chance that if you say something that they, the wrong person takes it the wrong way, they'll just arrest you. In America, when you call the cops, there's a good chance that you'll just wind up getting arrested.
Yeah, especially if let's tie the things together, because women and cops really seem to be the biggest, what is it called? Not risk.
Biggest threats, yeah.
The biggest threats is women and cops. The problem is that women and cops are tied together. Because when you call, like let's say that you're getting beat up by your girlfriend, or that she's hitting you with a frying pan or poisoning you or something, right? And then you call the cops, they will, I don't know in America, but I know in Australia, by law, they have to take you away.
They have that in America too. Yeah, if there's a domestic dispute going on,
Yeah.
they have to make an arrest. Always. And the person they arrest is the person who's most capable of causing the most damage.
No way.
You. Yeah, it's always you. So
Oh my God.
they just arrest you. There's been women who they'll rob people, and the way they rob people is they'll be dating a guy, then they'll call the cops for a domestic thing. He'll get arrested out of his own house. She'll be left. The cops will leave. She'll be in his house. Then she'll rob him, and then that's it. And there was a woman who did that like 18 times. She did it a ton of times before they finally put some kind of penalty on her.
You mean with different guys?
Yeah, 18 different guys, yeah.
Wow. So she was dating them, then she called the cops.
She would obviously not be dating them for very long, you know. She
Yeah.
would be hanging out with them 2 or 3
Yeah.
times. But that's another reason you wouldn't want, like, all this hookup culture, all this stuff. Like, women are dangerous. Don't be hooking up. Don't be, like, bringing some chick over to your house. Certainly not. You're going to take a stranger, a stranger who has a lot of power to cause a lot of damage. You're going to show them where your house is, and you're going to like don't do that so quickly. You know what I mean? Just like
I think you have much less risk overseas on that one.
Oh yeah,
because you don't have
in America. Once a chick's in your house, once you said she could stay the night,
yeah,
legally you can't kick her out. Legally, you have to evict her now. In a lot of states, you have to evict her, which is crazy.
No way.
Because she'll say, well, he said I could stay here. And you'll be like, no, I didn't say that. And the cops will be like, it's a civil issue at this point. You gotta start an eviction process to get her out. That's what happened when Hurricane Katrina hit back in 2005. A lot of families took in all these mostly black people that got displaced by the hurricane, and they let them stay in their house. And then they refused to leave. And instead of going through like a 6-month eviction process, trying to get this person out of your house who's actively destroying your house, right? Peeing on your walls, destroying things in your house, and you can't kick them out. Rather than do that, they paid them, they would pay these people like $1,000 to leave. So they just basically got robbed.
Wow.
In America, letting somebody stay at your house is an enormous risk.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy, man. That's crazy. Because it discourages humans from doing what humans really need the most, which is companionship, social network, social support, caring, loving people that listen, someone to talk to.
Our society is so litigious. There's so much... it's so litigious that people, when somebody's like injured on the side of the road, people won't stop to help because they're afraid of getting sued. If I pull somebody from a car that's on fire, they could sue me later. And it's like, well, he moved my spine and that caused me to be paralyzed. And that wouldn't have happened if he hadn't moved me. And then I have to spend a few years in court. So if I don't know the person, I'm just not going to help them because it's too much risk. Right.
Makes sense.
Risks are everywhere. Constant risk of legal stuff, and legal stuff is something you know nothing about. Something you have to pay a bunch of money for. Always, it's always a nightmare.
Oh, definitely. A lawsuit is a nightmare. There's no doubt about it. Even for lawyers, it is a nightmare. The lawyers, they don't want to get sued. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You would think because they're professionals, they would like bring it on, but no. I talked to a lawyer in Vegas and I asked him about his court case for his daughter, and he said, you know what? He goes, I lost my case.
Yeah.
And he's one of the best lawyers in Vegas.
Yeah.
I'm just like, what? He's like, I'm just telling you the truth, And I'm like, oh my God. That's terrifying.
Yeah. In America, you're constantly, you're disincentivized to leave your house. You're disincentivized to hang out with strangers or help other people. Like if there was some woman in the next apartment and I volunteered to take her kids to school 3 times a week, and this has happened in real life, she could sue me. She could say, he's been taking the kids to school 3 days a week. He's kind of like a father figure to them.
Right. He's taken on a fatherly role.
That's happened before.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you wind up actually having to pay child support or not. You still get sued, and it's still a nightmare. And so you just wouldn't help them. You know what I mean? It's too much of a risk. If that wasn't possible, then people would help out. But in America, anything you do besides going to work and paying taxes, any other activity is discouraged and penalized. They just want you in your cage, working, producing, spending money. You never get in trouble for spending money, but you do get in trouble for doing, free activities, walking around at night. You get hassled. Spending much money at a restaurant, cops are never there. Cops are never harassing you when you're blowing money, when you're paying people. But all the other times, you get harassed like crazy.
Wow, that's goddamn. That's interesting. I just wanted to say that in China that you don't want to take someone to a hospital either, because they can.
I've heard about that.
Yeah, you have to watch that one. I personally have helped people, and I just ignored the risk just because that's my nature, and I never. When it came down to the key moment, I said the right things and I didn't have to pay. Like when I was helping this guy, when we had that bus accident, there was this guy whose head was open. Like it was like he'd been scalped, and you could see his brains. And I closed his head and I used a curtain. I tied a curtain to keep his head down, the top of his head closed. And he was mumbling to me and I was talking to him, trying to keep him awake, until he got to the hospital. And then somebody said, "Is he your friend? Is he your friend?" And I was tempted to say yes, because I felt very close to the guy after, life and death. The guy's like dying, right? But I thought, no, I better say no. And I said, no, he's not my friend. And then the guy looked at me and goes, okay. And they took him away. But I think if I would have said yes, I think I probably would have had to pay for his bills. Now, in China in those days, it wouldn't have been that much money. So it wasn't like here. Here, if you have to pay someone's bill, or if you get sued, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
But in China, like, I don't know what I would have had to pay in 89 for that guy's whatever he needed. I suspect they didn't even have the services to really take care of him where I was. I was on Hainan Island, and the hospitals were very sparse. So I doubt it would have cost me more than $1,000. So that's good to keep in mind too. You know what I mean?
Right.
The amount of money. Because if I have to pay for some poor person to get medical care, I'll do that. I've done that before. I volunteered to pay for people's medical care, and also for animals. That's one thing I do. I'll go around and help people, because it's totally worth it to me. Because if you're going to help somebody, you want to do something that makes a difference, right? Don't give your money to some stupid charity where they're just going to spend it. Whereas if you see a guy who's almost burned to death and you pay for his care, you're doing something good that makes a difference, right? And that's what I do, those kind of things.
Yeah.
And it feels great, And it really helps me to understand, like, when you should give money, when you shouldn't, If I see somebody in need who's right there, obviously in tragic state, and I can afford to, I would love to help the guy, right? But I don't want to be blackmailable to some scumbag who's just taking advantage of me. That's the problem,
Oh, yeah.
And also, I don't want to pay American rip-off prices for medical care, Like I had a...
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I had a potential cancer. It wasn't, but I had a potential one taken off my back in India. I went to a doctor in Chennai, and I went to the best hospital, and he was a doctor. He had retired from New York. He was I forgot which school he was, but he was like a prestigious medical school. And he did the whole thing, and I forgot what it cost me. It was way back in the 90s, but I think it cost maybe under $100 or something, So it was,
Wow.
yeah. And he even gave me the piece that he took off in a little bottle so I could take it home, Because I said I wanted to keep it, Yeah. They're more fun. Like going to the hospital overseas can actually be interesting,
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
You can order good food. You can have your girlfriend come fuck you in the hotel bed. You can talk to the doctors. You can make friends with the doctors. It's a totally different situation than here. I just feel it's so much more human, Like you can order takeout. They'll deliver it to your bed.
In America, it's very. In America, it not only is it every person who goes to the hospital, all it is just an enormous expense. Anybody who's in a hospital, they're paying thousands of dollars.
Oh yeah.
Anything. It's already like this devastating expense. Being in a hospital is a nightmare. And then on top of that, you have visiting hours, all this other nonsense.
Well, you remember,
and you don't know the prices. You go in,
oh yeah,
they're doing these things to you, and you can't say no. But none of the prices are written down anywhere.
No, and they will not tell you either.
Yeah,
I stepped on a rusty fence when I was in Virginia, and then I got to Georgia, and then I realized I might have tetanus, and because I hadn't had a shot in like 9 years, so I did my research, and it said you'll die if you have it, so you better go get it. And so I did, and then I went to the Walmart where it was like $35 or something, and then he said, "Oh, sorry, we can't do it in Atlanta. We can't do tetanus. You need a doctor's,
prescription."
Yeah, prescription. So then I went to a doctor, and they were all closed. It was late, so then I had to go to the emergency room. I think it was $1,100 for that $35 shot.
Wow.
And it was such a scam because I told him, I said, tell me how much everything is. Like, because I might not do it because I probably am fine, right? And then the lady came in and took she took my pulse and stuff, and then she left, And then I got pissed off because I waited like 8 hours, right? And I went to the front. I said, look, I just want to leave. I haven't gotten any care yet. And she said, oh no, that doctor came in, the nurse came in, and you already owe $400.
Jeez.
Yeah, $400. And it was in the middle of coronavirus, and there's all these sick people in there coughing and everything. I mean, it was hell. In Asia, like I just go to the doctor whenever I want, and I put it on my credit card.
What?
Yeah. No, sometimes I'll have the doctor come to my house. Yeah. Yeah.
Come to your house like in the 1880s.
Yeah. Yeah, because I'll go to the hospital. I'll make friends with the doctor, and then when I need help, I'll call them, and then they'll come over. And like there's one guy, he had to put these. My knee got fucked up, so he had these needles that were like, God, they were like huge, like 6 inches long or 8 inches long, and he had to put them in this kind of oil, kind of lubrication on my knee. And he came over and he brought the needle. He had 2 needles, one to numb it, and the other one the big needle. And then I'm watching TV with him, and I got him a bottle of Baijiu and stuff, and I got him dinner and everything, and he was stoked. He's like, great to see you, Balnoa,
Wow, that's insane. In America, the only way to avoid the risk is to, number one, get illegal prescriptions. Like that's, unless you want to pay money to go to a hospital and get prescriptions, you really just have to like try to find drugs in different places online. It's like this nightmarish thing. So really, like anything you can do to avoid having to go to a doctor, having to go to a hospital, because number one, it's super expensive, but number two, it's just very inconvenient. Doctors, they're not even open on weekends, a lot of them, and so it's hard to even get medical care. In America, it's difficult to just get like a whole. You have to take a whole day off work just to go do this dumb small little thing. So anything where you need antibiotics or anything else like that is incredibly inconvenient. And so a lot of people just don't go. They'll have something that they have to get treated, and they don't have time, so they just don't go.
Well, when you guys at the summit, I'm going to give a full rundown on how to make friends with doctors in Asia and how to increase your social network. And it really pays off. It really does. A lot of foreigners don't know what I'm talking about. They basically just do things by the book. But the real Asian way is connections, friendships.
Oh, right. You told me. That's right.
Yeah, you got to do it that way. That is the way to go, and you'll have way better friends. You'll get way better medical care. You don't have to worry that you're going to get scammed. You know what I mean? Everybody's going to help you, and you can call them and get recommendation to another doctor. And even if you have a legal problem, you can call them because doctors are very respected overseas. And so, like let's say you have a problem with anybody, police, whatever, some kind of misunderstanding. You can call a doctor. Doctors are very respected. They can't solve everything, but you'd be surprised what they can solve. You'd be shocked. They're respected. And if they say, you put them on the line with somebody, and they'll be like, this is Dr. So-and-so at so-and-so hospital. And the guy's like, oh, shit. And then basically what he thinks is, God, this foreigner has connections, right? I don't want to, you know what I mean? Like this guy is, who knows who this guy knows, This guy's putting his ass on the line for the guy, right? Fuck that. And then they're nice to me, right? So there's ways to, not only the system is better in general, but there's ways to really be a good part of the system because they want you to do this. This is the Asian way. The Asian way is not the Western robotic by the book way. The Asian way is much more caring and much more real. Medical care. It's so much more real.
Wow.
And it makes you feel better. Like I feel when I go to, it was exactly 3 years ago that I was in the hospital for my back. This week, when I hurt my back, and I was like basically paralyzed for like a couple of days. I could not move, even my finger. And the pictures came up on Facebook as a memory. I was like, oh shit, man, I remember that. But like that time was enjoyable. I got to say, like good memories of that time in the prison, in the hospital, because they treated me really nice. Like it's nice to be taken care of. You know what I mean? It's nice that you just feel like someone cares. The nurses come in. There was this really cute one who came in at night to like wash me up and stuff. And she was cute actually. And she was super sweet. And she came in, she's like smiling and everything. Cause she was just like, it was awesome. And the doctor himself, was very good. And it was a top, I forget what the type of doctor he was. But the total bill for my ambulance, emergency room, MRI, 3 days in the hospital, 2 nights, a top doctor, nurses taking care of me, food, getting served to me, everything was $1,600
for back stuff. Holy cow!
And then when I left, I put it on my credit card, I paid the whole thing, left.
Wow!
I mean, $1,600 for 2 nights. There are people who pay that kind of money for hotels. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, you're getting worked on your back. That's very expensive here in America.
Oh, he was a top doctor in Thailand. Yeah, he was like probably the top doctor for that too.
Wow, that would be very expensive here.
I got his name and everything. So anybody has a back problem, I'll definitely hook you up with this guy. He's really nice too. He's really cool. I gotta say one funny story about the guy. When I overcame it, right, and I was standing there, I said, "Doctor," I said, "What's my prognosis?" And he looked at me in total shock. He goes, "Paul, you're doing so well. I don't know anybody else like you." He goes, I don't know. Just keep doing what you're doing, And it was because of all the yoga and the lifting weights and, it was everything, the positive attitude, good information. It was hard work because I was really trying hard to get over the thing. It was kind of a miracle, but I felt cared for, Sean. I felt cared for. And that means something too. You know what I mean?
Yeah. In America, everything's very, very impersonal. Everything's but it's not just that it's robotic. Like that would be one thing. Robotic would be fine, but everything is like very hostile.
Yes.
Like when you go to a hospital, it's very hostile. They treat you like you're stupid, or like you did something wrong, or like you're inconveniencing them. That's what it feels like when you go to the DMV. They make you feel like you're some kind of burden on them. That's what cops make you feel like.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of these places make you feel like. You make you feel like this dumb burden. Why don't you just go away?
Yeah. No, real. And it's not just that. It's the opposite that's so powerful. It's so powerful when you feel when you see people acting human. Because when you're in need, right? When you're hurt, right? And they see that you're a nice person and you're trying your best, people have sympathy. They have empathy, right? You know what I mean? And that's why they get into that field. It doesn't get beaten out of them, So you tend to get empathetic people in the medical field, right?
Wow.
So yeah, I know there's so many benefits. But the risk, yeah, this has been a great discussion. I don't think we should recap because I think there's already been so many great points that people can just listen again, if they want to. But I just want to say I want to say that to anybody still listening, we're doing the Thailand Summit on March 24th, 25th, 26th. And it's going to be a fucking blast. There's one guy who lives in Bangkok is coming. Daniel from Holland is coming. He came to the San Francisco Summit. He's going to go to Singapore and he's going to trek his way up from Singapore to Thailand and to Bangkok. We might be doing it for 1 or 2 days in Bangkok and then 1 or 2 days in Pattaya, which is a nearby beach town. It's like a $5 bus ride. So we'll probably do it partly in the city and then partly on the beach. That's kind of what I'm planning. So it's going to be a blast. It's going to be a total fucking blast. So if anybody hasn't traveled, get your passport. You don't need a visa for Thailand. You can get a visa on arrival. Check the internet, of course, to make sure for your country. But as far as I know, every country, it's the biggest. It's the number one tourist destination in the world. So everybody goes there from every country. Zambia, everybody. You meet everybody in Thailand, and they're all welcome. So it's easy to get there. Get your passport, and then come over and check it out. Even if you're not ready, you're thinking, in the future you want to be. You want to retire overseas or be digital nomad or whatever. Especially if you've never traveled, this has got to be one of the best ways to get started. Because you land a very soft landing. Because one, it's Thailand. It's kind of like training wheels for travel. Because it's the easiest place to go. Yeah. You can get a dormitory for $3 a night if you want to stay in Khao San Road. So you got all kinds of options. One of the guys has a 3-story house. So we got a lot of options. It's going to be good. It's going to be fun. Most guys want their own place. It's simply because it's so cheap and also because they might meet a girl or something like that, right? So, that kind of thing has been known to happen in Thailand. I've seen it before with my own eyes.
Wow. Really?
All right, Sean. Well, look, great that you're talking to you. Thanks for breaking that down. I like that. Because the one thing I don't want to be is I don't want to be the guy who is preparing for something that's not going to happen. Like fighting the last war. I want to be in the moment, fighting with all my resources and protecting myself from real threats with accurate appraisals, right? That's what I want to be. I want every shred of my action to be intelligent. That's my ultimate goal. I don't always reach that, but that's what I want. No wasted energy. But also, when you're ready for the punch, I got that, right? Just for the right place. Exactly where to act, where not to act, and what to avoid so you don't need to be in a bad situation, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for calling in this morning for giving me the idea for the threat model, and that really helped. So I want to say to everybody else, thank you very much, and I will see you soon. I hope to see you in Thailand. If you are going, you can comment below, but add me on Telegram. My ID is Ronin Free, Okay, Ronin free, no dots, no spaces. But don't just add me to chat. If you're going to come to the summit, go ahead and add me, and I'll help you out. So you won't be alone. You won't be like landing there freaking out. It's no big deal. It's no big deal. We if you're really freaking out, we can have somebody come out and meet you. It's so easy. It's like $2 to the airport on the public train. So, and it's fast too. It's like over this, it's like a monorail. So it just zoom zips through the city. So no worries at all. So thank you very much for listening.